They didn't raise their voices. That's what made it worse. They sat across from me, calm and united, and said, "You're going to apologize." Not because I was wrong, but because they decided I was expendable. I stood up, said no, and walked away, fully aware that I wasn't just refusing an apology. I was refusing the role they'd assigned me. They framed it as resolution. That's what people like this always do. Not what happened, not who said what, just the outcome they wanted. My mother leaned forward and said, "This is how we move on." My father nodded beside her. My sibling didn't look at me at all. That's when I realized this conversation wasn't about repair. It was about compliance. They'd already decided I was the problem. All that was left was getting me to say it out loud. "Just apologize," my mother said again. "It doesn't have to mean anything." That sentence landed harder than anything else, because if an apology doesn't mean anything, then it isn't remorse. It's submission. I asked one question: what exactly am I apologizing for? No one answered directly. Instead, I got phrases, your tone, the way you handled it, how it made everyone feel. Nothing concrete, nothing specific, just enough ambiguity to make the demand permanent. I looked around the room. They weren't angry. They weren't emotional. They were patient. That's what made it dangerous. They were waiting for me to step back into place. That's when I understood the role they'd written for me a long time ago. The one who absorbs discomfort, the one who smooths things over, the one who apologizes so everyone else can stay comfortable. They thought I'd accept it again. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and said, "I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do." The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was calculation. "You're being stubborn," my father said. "No," I replied. "I'm being finished." That was the moment the conversation ended, even though they didn't realize it yet. Because once you refuse to accept a role that benefits everyone else, the system built around it starts to shake. And that's when the real consequences begin. They didn't chase me right away. That came later. At first, they let the silence do the work. No messages that night, no follow-ups the next morning. Just space. The kind meant to make you second-guess yourself. It didn't work. The calls started 2 days later. My mother first. "I don't know why you're making this so hard," she said, calm but clipped. "This could be over already." "It is over," I replied. She paused. "So you're really choosing this?" I understood what she meant. Choosing conflict, choosing distance, choosing to be difficult. "Yes," I said. "I am." That's when the narrative shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about the apology anymore. It was about me. I was being cold. I was being dramatic. I was holding grudges. No one mentioned the original situation. No one clarified what I'd supposedly done wrong. They didn't need to. The story they were telling didn't require facts. My sibling tried next. "You know how they are," they said. "Just say it and move on." I asked what I was apologizing for, I replied. No one answered. "They don't need details," my sibling said. "They just need peace." There it was, peace, purchased with my silence. The pressure escalated subtly. Invitations stopped. Information stopped flowing. Decisions were made without me, pointedly, deliberately. It wasn't accidental, it was conditioning. One evening, my father finally said it plainly. "You're going to regret this," he told me. "You're isolating yourself." I didn't argue. "I'm not isolated," I said. "I'm no longer managed." He didn't like that. That's when I realized something important. They weren't upset that I walked away. They were upset that I hadn't come back asking for forgiveness. Because the system only works if the person who refuses eventually returns. Smaller, quieter, apologetic. I wasn't doing that. Every attempt to pull me back sounded the same. Urgency dressed as concern, disappointment framed as love, pressure disguised as family values. And every time I gave the same answer, no explanation, no defense, no apology. By the end of the week, the tone had changed again. Less persuasion, more threat. And that's when I knew the next step wouldn't be conversation. It would be consequence. They stopped pretending it was about reconciliation. That came later. First, they made sure I felt the cost. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They arrived in pieces. A family event I wasn't told about until after it happened. A decision made collectively that somehow excluded me. A conversation where my name was mentioned carefully, like a liability. They wanted me to notice. They wanted the absence to sting. My mother stopped asking why and started telling me what would happen. "If you keep this up," she said, "you're going to lose people." I listened. Then I replied, "People who require obedience aren't losses." She didn't answer. My father was less subtle. He showed up at my door unannounced. "You're making a mistake," he said, standing just far enough back to look reasonable. "Families don't survive this kind of stubbornness." I didn't invite him in. "This isn't stubbornness," I said. "It's a boundary," he scoffed. "Same thing." "No," I replied. "A boundary ends where control begins." That was the first time I saw real anger flash across his face. They tried leverage next. Old favors, old sacrifices, all the things I supposedly owed them. "I don't understand how you can do this after everything," my mother said during one call. I understood perfectly. That was the problem. What they couldn't tolerate wasn't my refusal. It was my calm. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't begging to be let back in. I was continuing my life, unchanged. That terrified them. The final attempt came dressed as reason, a message asking to talk things through, a suggestion that everyone had reflected, an implication that I was the one keeping things stuck. I asked one question. "Are you asking me to apologize?" There was a pause, then, "Yes, for your part." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That silence did more damage than any argument could have, because it forced them to sit with something they hadn't planned for. The possibility that the person they expected to bend wasn't going to. By that point, the chain reaction was complete. Access had changed. Authority had shifted. And the rules they'd relied on no longer applied. They thought demanding an apology would restore order. Instead, it exposed how fragile their control really was. What finally ended, it wasn't a fight. It was my consistency. Weeks passed, then months, and I didn't reach out. I didn't test the temperature. I didn't send olive branches. I didn't ask if they were ready to talk. Because the conversation they wanted only had one acceptable outcome: my submission. Life didn't fall apart the way they'd predicted. It stabilized. The constant background tension disappeared. The careful wording, the emotional bookkeeping, the quiet pressure to stay manageable. Without realizing it, I'd stepped out of a system that required me to diminish myself to function. And once you leave something like that, you don't miss it. They tried once more. A neutral message, no apology, no accountability. Just a suggestion that enough time had passed. I read it slowly, then I deleted it, because time doesn't repair damage when the people responsible refuse to acknowledge it. It only makes the pattern clearer. What they never understood was that the apology wasn't the point. Control was. They wanted to restore the version of me who absorbed blame so everyone else could stay comfortable. That version no longer exists. I don't feel angry. I feel precise. I know exactly where the line is now, and exactly who steps over it. And I no longer argue with people who benefit from pretending they don't see it. My family demanded I apologize. They believed refusal would isolate me. They believed distance would weaken me. They believed silence would eventually bring me back. They were wrong. Because the moment I chose to walk away, something shifted permanently. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped negotiating reality. I stopped proving I deserved respect. And once you stop doing those things, people who rely on your compliance lose their leverage. Completely. They thought this was about an apology. It wasn't. It was about whether I would continue to play a role that required me to disappear. I chose not to. And that decision didn't just end the conflict. It ended the version of me they were counting on. That's the thing they never got back. And they never will.